Part 2 of the series opens with Morpheus and Matthew arriving at Hell to retrieve the magical helm. However, at the gates, Morpheus is unable to enter as a king is not able to enter another monarch's realm uninvited. So, he hits the drum outside and a giant demon named Squatterbloat approaches them and learns that Morpheus wants a meeting with his sovereign. They chat briefly before Squatterbloat opens the gate to let them in. In Buffalo, John is walking through the streets when he nearly gets hit by a car. A woman, Rosemary, stops out to help him and after a bit of chat, offers to take him home. So, John sits in Rosemary's car and starts sharing his story. He reveals that he used to live in Mayhew a few years ago, and his things are still there. He then talks about his mom moving around a lot and passing away recently. He goes on to say how his mother was a thief as she stole art, jewelry, and other people's identities. As a result, they had to keep moving all the time to avoid the authorities. John continues to talk about how he was imprisoned for many things, murder being one of them, which puts some worry in Rosemary's eyes. During their conversation, we learn that John had taken his mother's ruby and after that, he had killed many people, although he says he did it in self-defense. Rosemary learns that his mother had him arrested and thrown in a prison for arson and murder too. He was then shifted to a mental hospital. Back in Hell, as Squatterbloat is directing Morpheus and Matthew to the palace, the two talk about the King of Hell, Lucifer Morningstar. We learn that our Lord and the King of Hell have known each other for a long time. Morpheus tells Matthew that the devil used to be the most beautiful, wisest, and powerful of all angels. In fact, after him, Lucifer is probably the most powerful being there is. The demon then takes the pair through a mysterious path. On this path, Morpheus sees a jailed woman who he calls Nada. She asks for his forgiveness so she can finally be free. Nada questions if he still loves him, but Morpheus reminds her it has been 10,000 years. Although he still loves her, he has not yet forgiven her. As they carry on walking through Hell, Matthew asks about Nada. Lord Morpheus explains how he was in love with her. She was the leader of a tribe that was called the First People, but after she defied him, he placed her in Hell. After a while, they finally reach Lucifer's palace. Morpheus explains that he thinks one of her demons has his helm and he wants it back. But when he mentions that he doesn't know the name, Lucifer says they'll have to summon all of them. Once she brings them forward, Morpheus pours out some sand while saying it will identify the demon. Moments after, the demon with his helm appears in front of him. Lucifer identifies him as Choronzon, Akka the Duke of Hell. Choronzon then tells Morpheus that he will have to fight him for the helm. The Lord of Dreams agrees to the terms that he will serve him in Hell for eternity if he is defeated. He chooses himself while Choronzon picks Lucifer to represent him. Meanwhile, back in Buffalo, Rosemary stops for gas and John says he will accompany her inside the shop. While he is looking for a drink, Rosemary tells the clerk that she needs him to call 911 because John is an escaped murderer. However, John overhears them and tells Rosemary they need to go. Just then, the clerk pulls out a gun, points it at John, and tells him to let go of her. Suddenly, we see blood splattered on the window before John and Rosemary leave the store. His amulet of protection has done its magical thing to kill the clerk. Once back on the road, Rosemary asks if John will hurt her, to which he states he will not as long as she is taking him to his ruby. In Hell, the duel between Lucifer and Lord Morpheus begins. We learn that this is some kind of a mind duel instead of a physical one. Lucifer makes the first move and says she is a direwolf, while Morpheus says he is a horse-mounted, wolf-stabbing hunter. We see that the wolf is hit by a bow, causing Lucifer to experience pain. She then mentions that she is a horse-biting, poison-toothed serpent. In response, the Lord says he is a snake-devouring bird of prey. Lucifer is left with scratches on her face before she chooses to be a butcher bacterium. This hurts Morpheus and he drops to the ground in pain. Next, he says he is a world, but Lucifer counterattacks and says she is a nova. Morpheus weakens as he is knocked to the ground. The two keep one-upping the other until Morpheus becomes a universe filled with life. Lucifer becomes anti-life and fatally wounds Lord Morpheus. He struggles to talk while Lucifer doesn't think anything can survive the anti-life. However, Morpheus still has an ace up his sleeve. He asserts that he is hope. With this, Lucifer admits defeat and instructs Choronzon to return the helm to the King of Dreams. Following this, Morpheus dons his helm and locates his ruby, but once he retrieves it, he notices something is wrong because the ruby has been altered. Suddenly, a blast occurs, knocking down Morpheus and his raven. Just then, Rosemary and John arrive outside. As John goes inside and retrieves the red jewel, Rosemary waits. He picks up the ruby from the ground before returning to Rosemary, while Matthew and Morpheus begin moving around. When John comes back outside, he gives Rosemary the amulet of protection as a token of gratitude for being a good person. He doesn't need it now that he has his ruby. He explains the ruby makes dreams come true, and he will use it to save the world. John then walks into a cafe where the waitress, Bette Munro, comes over to serve him. He shows her the ruby, thanking it for giving him a good time lately. After Bet gets his coffee, John watches as the waitress interacts with her coworkers Lindy and Marsh. She also converses with customers like Judy, who is trying to contact her girlfriend, Donna. Meanwhile, another customer, Mark, enters and sits down for coffee while he waits for his interview with a company named Vanguard. Next, we see a couple entering the cafe. The wife of the couple, Kate, is the CEO of the company Mark is interviewing for. We learn that the couple is celebrating their 5-year anniversary. It turns out Bet set them up and calls them her proudest achievement. She then goes to take orders from them. Kate says they'll have salads, but her husband, Gary, seems to like the idea of getting a burger. She urges him to get the double-decker burger if that is what he wants. Regardless, they end up getting spinach salads. When Bet returns to John's table to take his order, he admits he doesn't think she is just a waitress. John uses his ruby to make Bet tell the truth. She tells him she writes and her characters are based on real people, but their stories all have happy endings. He thinks it is a relief to tell the truth, and they're going to change the world, thus making a more honest one. With this, John starts using his rub on all the folks inside the cafe. Meanwhile, we learn that the couple of 5 years aren't happy with each other anymore. They fight over trivial matters. The husband, Gary, begins revealing the truth regarding their recent dispute. Judy decides to leave but suddenly stops at the door. She turns around as Bet sits her down like she just arrived. When a confused Judy sits in her booth, John is waiting there to ask if she is okay. With the help of his ruby, Judy begins explaining how Donna left around 12 p.m. last night after a fight. When she is done, the same thing happens with the happy couple as they argue on the way out. They turn back around and sit down. Once they sit back down, Bet invites Mark over to explain his interview. Despite her husband, Gary, Kate invites Mark to sit down to do the interview here. Proud of her work once again, Bet goes back to Marsh in the kitchen to explain what happened, and also invites him to come back to her place. We learn that Bet is in love with Marsh. In his booth, John is using his ruby once again, which makes Marsh finally open up and speak freely with Bet. Marsh explains how he does not come over to her place for Bet, but rather so he does not have to cook. He also does this so he can be intimate with Bet's 21-year-old son, Bernard. Bet storms off after hearing this news to the bathroom where Judy comforts her. Judy says there is something wrong with Marsh if he broke up with her. After Bet gets mad and leaves, Gary enters the kitchen to avoid dealing with his wife. He goes on to explain to Marsh how he likes to eat, drink, and have sex even though Kate does not, and sometimes he is desperate. In the meantime, Kate interviews Mark with her looking more longingly at the latter with every second. Each pairing builds with sexual tension before they are all going at it. Kate and Mark are being intimate in the booth. Judy and Bet are hooking up in the bathroom. And then Marsh is helping out Gary in the kitchen. Meanwhile, we see John walking around as he sees everyone having sex, including Marsh and Gary. He admires all the pairs as they are under the influence of the ruby's magic. Back in the bathroom, Judy finally confesses to hitting Donna in the face when they were fighting last night. This is quickly followed by a commotion when Gary finds out about his wife and Mark. He begins attacking and choking Mark until the latter uses a spare knife to stab his attacker in the neck, killing him. Mark tries to explain himself before Bet turns her attention to John, who is calmly watching the television. With the help of the newscaster talking about rampant destruction around the world, Bet is able to deduce that John is responsible for all of the events of tonight. John explains that all he did was take away the lies, and they did the rest. To demonstrate his power more, John has all the folks harm and kill themselves. At last, Bet is alive, but she still does not see why John did what he did. She walks over to the dead bodies before asking John how this is his version of a better world. He then tells her she needs to close her eyes and embrace the darkness. Suddenly, the waitress stabs her eyes out to look at the world differently. This somehow leads to the Fates, 3 goddesses using the bodies of Bet, Kate, and Judy to tell John his future. Other than telling him he will return to dust, the Fates tell John that he will drain all of the power he has of Morpheus. At the mention of his name, Lord Morpheus appears at the cafe and confronts John. He wants to take the ruby back so he can fix the damage John has done. John argues he is right for removing Bet's and others' lies. The Lord, however, explains how these are not lies they are telling but rather their dreams. Kate dreams of running away where no one will find her. As for Gary, he dreams of proving his father was wrong about him. That dreams of making something that matters to people. If John takes away their dreams and hope, all the negativity that has happened because of him will be the truth of mankind. Making his plans clear, John states he will use the ruby to drain the King of Dreams of his power so he can become the new Lord. Morpheus states if John wants this, then he will have to try it in his dreams. He then throws John into a dream where he finds his mother wearing the helm in bed. Before long, his mother is choking from behind while saying his father was right when he said that she should have aborted him. Seeing his trauma reiterate, John tells himself it is just a dream as the ruby begins glowing. This snaps him out of his traumatic memory and transports him to Morpheus' palace. As he begins destroying the palace with the help of the ruby, he claims that the kingdom is now his. Using the ruby to absorb the Dream Lord's power, John is able to defeat him. The ruby breaks with the pieces falling to the ground before John finds himself all alone. However, this destruction of the ruby actually allows Morpheus to receive all the power from the jewel and overtake John. While holding John in his palm, the Dream Lord reveals that he destroyed the ruby and released the power inside it. Since John was just a victim of some horrible circumstances, and the ruby came to him through no fault of his own, Morpheus decides to not kill him. Instead, he puts John back in his prison hospital without any magical artifacts to aid him. The final scene shows Morpheus and his raven discussing how they plan to undo all the destruction John caused. Since the Dream Lord has retrieved all his tools, he can now begin to rebuild the dreaming and the waking world. As the two walk away, Desire, Morpheus' sister, appears behind them before telling Big Brother she is watching him. Subscribe to see more videos like this, turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Don't forget to watch part 3. Thanks for watching.